Okay, so today an education and promotion of this amazing album. We all know about this one, but how did it come about? Bitches Brew is a studio album by American jazz trumpeter, composer, and bandleader Miles Davis. It was recorded from August 19th to 21st, 1969 at Columbia Studio B in New York City and released on March 30th, 1970 by Columbia Records. It marked his continuing experimentation with electric instruments that he had featured on his previous record, the critically acclaimed In a Silent Way 1969. With these instruments, such as the electric piano and guitar, Davis departed from traditional jazz rhythms in favor of loose rock-influenced arrangements based on improvisation. The final tracks were edited and pieced together by producer Thierry Macero, one of the very great, most genius, innovative, influential producers in the history of the recording music medium. The album initially received a mixed critical and commercial response because people are squares, as we know, but it gained momentum and became Davis's highest charting album on the US Billboard 200, peaking at number 35. In 1971, it won a Grammy Award for Best Large Jazz Ensemble Album. Maybe I was wrong about this album. It did win a Grammy. Well, Steely Dan won Grammys. That's okay, though. I assume they won Grammys. It's just like sort of music. I love Steely Dan. I'm such a square myself. In 1976, it became Davis' first gold album to be certified by the Recording Industry Association of America. Wait a minute. A group named after something from William S. Burroughs is not square. Just to be perfectly clear. The fact that people consider it as such is baffling to me. I think it was like one George Carlin bit, and it was just like in the 90s, and it was just done. Yeah. In subsequent years, Bitches Brew gained recognition as one of jazz's greatest albums and a progenitor of the jazz rock genre, as well as a major influence on rock and 70s crossover musicians. In 1998, Columbia released the complete Bitches Brew Sessions, a 4-disc box set that includes the original album and previously unreleased material. In 2003, the album was certified platinum, wow, reflecting shipments of 1 billion copies. And that's 2003, that would have been the CD. Gee, that's good stuff, nice. By 1969, Davis' core working band consisted of Wayne Shorter on soprano saxophone, Dave Holland on bass. Dave Holland is a genius. Conference of the Birds is where it's fucking at, by the way. Chick Corea on electric piano, and Jack DeJohnette. Oh, this guy's albums are fucking awesome, by the way, on drums. I'm a huge fan of, like, the jazz drum virtuoso band leaders and the albums that they would put out for the 70s. Your Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette, Alphonse Malzahn. These guys are the greatest jazz. They're the greatest band leaders of all time. So underrated. Even artists like Philly Joe Jones and I think Rashid Ali has an album. Louis Hayes is a really good album. And so does obviously the Buddy Rich. The Max Roach albums are phenomenal. Anyway, I'm a big fan of jazz drummers, but we'll move on. We'll talk about that another time, I suppose. The group minus DeJohnette recorded In a Silent Way, 1969, which also featured Joe Zawinul. I never know how to pronounce that correctly, and I have heard it pronounced before. I've seen a couple of documentaries on him and or Weather Report. John McLaughlin, Tony Williams, and Herbie Hancock. The album marked the beginning of Davis's electric period, incorporating instruments such as the electric piano and guitar and jazz fusion styles. For his next studio album, Davis wished to explore his electronic and fusion style even further. While touring with his 5-piece from the spring to August 1969, he introduced new pieces for his band to play, including early versions of what became Miles Run's Voodoo Down, Sanctuary, and Spanish Key. At this point in his career, Davis was influenced by contemporary rock and funk music, Zawinul's playing with Cannonball Adderley, and the work of English composer Paul Buckmaster. I don't think I'm as familiar with Buckmaster. There you go. I'll have to look into that one of these days, fairly soon. In August 1969, Davis gathered his band for a rehearsal 1 week prior to the booked recording sessions. As well as his 5-piece, they were joined by Zawinul, McLaughlin, Larry Young, Lenny White, Don Alias. He's an awesome percussionist. He pops up everywhere, actually. Juma Santos and Benny Maupin. He's like a cornetist? Multi-reedist. Yeah, no, bass, clarinet, flute, and saxophones. Because I've heard one of his albums before, I believe. Anyway, Davis had written simple chord lines, at first for 3 pianos, which he expanded into a sketch of a larger scale composition. He presented the group with some musical sketches and told them they could play anything that came to mind as long as they played off of his chosen chords. Davis had not arranged each piece because he was unsure of the direction the album was to take. He wanted whatever was produced to come from an improvisational process, not some prearranged shit. My man. Reminds me of when John Joss told me to my face, when I asked him, oh, so to what degree was your film, his more recent film at that time, scripted? And he asked me sarcastically, what's a script? My man. No, because there was a scene in that film which was the best piece of acting improvisation I've almost ever seen. It was so real. Anyway, Davis booked Columbia Studio B in New York City from August 19th to 21, 1969. The session on August 19th began at 10 a.m., the band playing Bitches Brew first. Everyone was set up in a half circle with Davis and Shorter in the middle. In Lenny White's words, it was like an orchestra and Miles was our conductor. We wore headphones. We had to be able to hear each other. There were no guests at that session. No photos allowed. Damn, I would love to have seen fucking photos of that session. Jesus Christ. But there was one guest that nobody talked about. Max Roach. Ah, interesting. All live recording, no overdubs. 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. for 3 days. Lenny White. I didn't know that. Not many people do, seemingly. As usual with Davis recording sessions during this period, tracks were recorded in sections. Davis gave a few instructions, a tempo count, a few chords or a hint of melody, and suggestions as to mood or tone. Davis liked to work this way. He thought it forced musicians to pay close attention to one another, to their own performances, or to Davis's cues, which could change from moment to moment. On the quieter passages of Bitches Brew, for example, Davis's voice is audible giving instructions to the musicians, snapping his fingers to indicate tempo, telling the musicians to keep it tight in his distinctive voice, or instructing individuals when to solo, e.g. saying John during the title track. John McLaughlin and Sanctuary were also recorded during the August 19th session. Towards the end, the group rehearsed Pharaoh's dance. Despite his reputation as a cool, melodic improviser, much of Davis playing on the album is aggressive and explosive, often playing fast runs and venturing into the upper register of the trumpet. His closing solo on Miles Runs the Voodoo Down is particularly noteworthy in this regard. Davis did not perform on the short piece John McLaughlin. It is not known where the album title came from, and there are various theories as to where it originates. Some believe that it was a reference to women in Davis' life who were introducing him to cultural changes in the 60s. Other explanations have been given. Obviously not listed here, that's just sourced with an article from Jazz Times. Whatever. Significant editing was made to the recorded music. Short sections were spliced together to create longer pieces, and various effects were applied to the recordings. Paul Tingen reports, Bitches Brew also pioneered the application of the studio as a musical instrument, featuring stacks of edits and studio effects that were an integral part of the music. Miles and his producer Tia Macero used the recording studio in radical new ways, especially in the title track and the opening track Pharaoh's Dance. There were many special effects like tape loops, tape delays, reverb chambers, and echo effects. Through intensive tape editing, Macero concocted many totally new musical structures that were later imitated by the band in live concerts. Macero, who had a classical education and was most likely inspired by 50s and 60s French music concrete experiments, used tape editing as a form of arranging and composition. Pharaoh's Dance contains 19 edits. Its famous stop-start opening is entirely constructed in the studio, using repeat loops of certain sections. Later on in the track, there are several micro-edits. For example, a 1 second long fragment that first appears at 8:39 is repeated 5 times between 8:54 and 8:59. The title track contains 15 edits, again with several short tape loops of, in this case, 5 seconds at 3:01, 3:07, and 3:12. Therefore, Bitches Brew not only became a controversial classic of musical innovation, it also became renowned for its pioneering use of studio technology. Now that ends the quote there from Paul Tingen. Though Bitches Brew was in many ways revolutionary, perhaps its most important innovation was rhythmic. The rhythm section for this recording consists of 2 bassists, one playing bass guitar, the other double bass, 2 to 3 drummers, 2 to 3 electric piano players, and a percussionist, all playing at the same time. As Paul Tanner, Maurice Guerreau, and David McGill explain, it takes 3 people to explain this, I guess. Like rock groups, Davis gives the rhythm section a central role in the ensemble's activities. His use of such a large rhythm section offers the soloists wide but active expanses for their solos. Tanner, Guerreau, and McGill further explain that the harmonies used in this recording move very slowly and function modally, M-O-D-A-L, guys, rather than in a more tonal fashion typical of mainstream jazz. The static harmonies and rhythm section's collective embellishment create a very open arena for improvisation. The musical result flows from basic rock patterns to hard bop textures and at times even passages that are more characteristic of free jazz. The solo voices heard most prominently on this album are the trumpet and the soprano saxophone, respectively, of Miles and Wayne Shorter. Notable also is Bernie Maupin's bass clarinet, present on 4 tracks. The technology of recording, analog tape, disc mastering, and inherent recording time constraints had, by the late 60s, expanded beyond previous limitations and sonic range for the stereo vinyl album, and Bitches Brew reflects this. Its long-form performances include improvised suites with rubato sections, tempo changes, or the long, slow crescendo, more common to a symphonic orchestral piece or Indian raga form than the 3-minute rock song. Starting in 1969, Davis' concerts included some of the material that would become Bitches Brew. Now the reception and legacy. This is quite interesting here. Reviewing for Rolling Stone in 1970, Langdon Winner said Bitches Brew shows Davis' music expanding in beauty, subtlety, and sheer magnificence, finding it so rich in its form and substance that it permits and even encourages soaring flights of imagination by anyone who listens. He concluded that the album would reward in direct proportion to the depth of your own involvement. That's an interesting take. Some hack in the Village Voice deemed it good music that's very much like jazz and something like rock, naming it the year's best album and Davis Jazz Man of the Year in his ballot for Jazz and Pop magazine. Years later, he had lost some enthusiasm about the album in some hack's record guide, Rock Albums of the 70s, 1981. He's called Bitches Brew. He concluded that the music has gotten too popular for me to enjoy. I'm not even going to read that garbage. Selling more than 1 million copies since it was released, Bitches Brew was viewed by some writers in the 1970s as the album that spurred jazz's renewed popularity with mainstream audiences that decade. Did it? As Michael Segel wrote in 1978, jazz was considered commercially dead by the 1960s until the album's successes opened the eyes of music industry executives to the sales potential of jazz-oriented music. This led to other fusion records that refined Davis' new style of jazz and sold millions of copies, including Headhunters 1973 by Herbie Hancock and George Benson's 1976 album Breezin'. Tom Hull, who would later become a jazz critic, has said, back in the early 70s, we used to listen to Bitches Brew as late-night chill-out music, about the only jazz I ran into at the time. According to independent scholar Jane Gary, Bitches Brew defined and popularized the jazz fusion genre, also known as jazz rock, but it was hated by a number of purists. Jazz critic and producer Bob Rush recalled, "This to me was not great black music, but I cynically saw it as part and parcel of the commercial crap that was beginning to choke and bastardize the catalogs of such dependable companies as Blue Note and Prestige. I hear it better today because there is now so much music that is worse." What the fuck is this horrible take? Rush has also been accused of allegedly sexually abusing students when he worked as a teacher. Okay, that says it all, doesn't it? That really says it all. He's Caucasian. What the hell is he talking about? Like what black music is for? What a poser. What a poser. Despite the controversy, the album stirred among the jazz community. It nonetheless topped Downbeat's annual critics poll in 1970. The Penguin Guide to Jazz called Bitches Brew one of the most remarkable creative statements of the last half-century in any artistic form. It is also profoundly flawed, a gigantic torso of burstingly noisy music, but absolutely refuses to resolve itself under any recognized guise. Oh, it doesn't follow the rules, does it, Penguin Guide to Jazz? Oh, jazz isn't following rules. Oh, no! In 2003, the album was ranked number 94 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the... whatever. 9 years later, it went down one spot because they're hacks. Everyone's a hack today. In the 2020 list, it climbed to number 87. Like, why is this even here? This isn't... I didn't need to... it's my fault for reading it out. Experimental jazz drummer Bobby Previtt considered Bitches Brew to be groundbreaking. How much groundbreaking music do you hear now? It was music that you had that feeling you never quite heard before. It came from another place. How much music do you hear now like that? Tom York, singer of the English rock band Radiohead, cited as an influence on 97's OK Computer. It was building something up and watching it fall apart. That's the beauty of it. It was at the core of what we were trying to do. Well, you failed, basically, overall. The singer Bilal names it among his 25 favourite albums, citing Davis' stylistic reinvention. Who's this? Bilal. Okay, apparently he's, like, well-known, but, like, I've never heard of him. I'm sure he's good. Whatever. Rock and jazz musician Donald Fagen criticized the album as, Fagen! Oh, fuck you. You are a square. You are a square. I claimed you weren't, but no, you are. You know what? We're ending it here. Fagen's broken my heart. All right. Fuck everyone. This is my last show.